Get your tight pants on, because we're going to the 80s. In this video, I'm going to show you 5 of my favorite records from 1980 to 1989. The 1980s were not all high kicks and long hair. There was a lot of incredible music that came out in the 80s that you may not know, and I'm here to show you. There's some obvious classics and then some ones that you may have never heard of, but in this series I am going to dive into my favorite albums from the decade. 1986. Paul Simon, half of Simon and Garfunkel, long into his solo career, decided to go to Africa and come back with Afrobeat-inspired thoughts. He came up with this album, Graceland, which I think is his best album solo. Very different than all of his other solo albums, very different than Simon and Garfunkel. This has joyful with like bubblegum, poppy, but African, Afrobeat-inspired sounds. There's nothing really like this album, well, until Vampire Weekend came out and kind of took what he did and made it almost better, but that's arguable. This is the first mainstream Afrobeat album to come out of America. I think. If I'm wrong, please let me know, but I think this is probably the most popular title to be inspired by Afrobeat or African music in America. Of course, Fela Kuti came first. I'm talking about another artist, Paul Simon, taking another culture and appreciating it in a different way, much like George Harrison did when he brought world music to the Beatles. This album, I mean, you've probably heard at least 3 or 4 of the songs on here. You've probably heard Graceland, you've probably heard You Can Call Me Al, The Boy in the Bubble, Diamonds on the Sole of Her Shoes. This is just a really fun pop album, and it's so unique for Paul Simon's catalog. So, Graceland, 1986, highly recommend it. Everybody wants to rule the world, and for a while, Tears for Fears did rule the world. They are one of the most underrated 80s acts, because most people know them for just their big songs like Shout, Everybody Wants to Rule the World, Head Over Heels, which are all on this album for the record. They're more than just their singles. This is one of the best synth pop, kind of dark, poppy bands from the 80s that exists. I mean, these guys are excellent. And in their later years, I'm talking the past few years, they've taken to cover some really good indie rock songs like Animal Collective stuff and Arcade Fire stuff. They're staying incredibly hip, relevant, which is what they were back in the 80s and what they should be now. This is a great album, Songs from the Big Chair, and I think anyone should own this. And if you don't know Tears for Fears beyond maybe Mad World or the songs I mentioned, I think you're going to really enjoy giving this a full listen. Stone in Love!
Wow.
This is Journey's probably most commercially successful album, Escape. This came out in 1981. It has their biggest hit, one of the most famous songs of all time, Don't Stop Believin', as the first song to open the album. What a bold choice. And then it follows up with my favorite Journey song, which is a little known song that not many people sing when they sing their favorite Journey hits, but it's called Stone in Love, and it is excellent. I have so many good memories of my friends and I in high school singing along to so many Journey songs. This album is just really, really wonderful. Who's Crying Now is on here, as well as Mother, Father, Open Arms. This has so many hits from their catalog. This is not like Boston's first album, even though this wasn't Journey's first album, where the whole thing is worth listening to, plays like a greatest hits, and I think everyone probably owns this because you can find it for $3 or $4. But if you don't own it, take a look at your record store, and I believe that you can find it.
Oh my god.
Dire Straits Making Movies. This is an exceptional album. The frontman of Dire Straits is Mark Knopfler, and he is one of my favorite guitarists ever. I haven't been able to get into his solo career as much as I want to, which is a shame because I hear it's really worth listening to, but his stuff with Dire Straits, the guitar tone in Dire Straits is one of the most soothing and beautiful sounds I think that exists. I'm surprised more bands don't try to copy that sound. If they do, I've never heard of them. It's this super iconic, clean Fender Strat sound, and my favorite Dire Straits song, Romeo and Juliet, is on this album. Again, one of the most beautiful songs ever written lyrically, melody-wise. That song should be remembered for centuries to come. The Killers do a really good cover of it too, actually. But this album, as well as the albums surrounding it, I think like the one before, the one after, all really, really good albums. The guitar work, I'm telling you, it is in the way that Tycho affected me when that guitar synthy sound kind of came to be. Same thing with Mark Knopfler. It is just the most beautiful guitar tone. Just listen to it. You'll understand when I say it. There's nothing like him. Sultans of Swing is not on this album, but that guitar solo is just And finally, it wouldn't be one of these videos if I didn't mention Bob Dylan. Yes, a rare 80s Bob Dylan mention. This came out late in the 80s. This is 1989. the year I was born. And this is Oh Mercy. So Bob Dylan was not good in the 80s. The majority of his albums were absolute trash. at least in comparison to his early stuff. This is a rare gemstone where he kind of came out of his days and he like pumped out some classic tunes that were as good as any of the stuff he put out at the beginning of his career, and then he fell back into his weird slump and started covering Sinatra, and here we are today. This is an album that is absolutely worth listening to and talking about in the same way you would talk about some of his best albums from the 60s and 70s. Man in the Long Black Coat, What Good Am I, Political World, all insanely good Dylan songs for late in his career. I really don't understand how he pulled those out after what he was putting out around this era. It's shocking, really. But not super easy to find on vinyl. I think it might have just got a reissue, but an original press is going to cost you maybe like 30-40 bucks if you can find it in good condition. So, Oh Mercy, definitely worth checking out. If you kind of wrote Bob Dylan off after the 70s, you're like, all right, you're done. He's not done. He's got this, and it's good. Those are my first 5 picks from the 80s. Now, there's a lot more 80s material. I was trying to pick the first 5, and I had so much trouble. I mean, I didn't even talk about Depeche Mode, but there's a lot more where this came from. I have a lot more of these videos to make in the future. Please leave a comment. Let me know what your favorite 80s albums are. The next one might feature your album. Who knows? If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe. More videos very soon.